Boogeyman Ben. Horror Zone.
Hey everyone, it's Boogeyman Ben. Hope everyone's doing well. This is going to be my third horror comedy segment. Like I did in previous videos, I'm talking about films that blend both into the comedy and the horror genre very well. If you couldn't tell by the shirt that I'm wearing, this video is going to be focusing on the Ghostbusters films. So I have two sets of the Ghostbusters films. This is the DVD, and then I just recently, about 6 months ago, bought the Blu-ray. So this has Ghostbusters 1 and 2, as does this. This one is actually signed by Ernie Hudson. So I've shown this before in videos in the past. But what I want to do in this segment, instead of just focusing on one film, I want to focus on both. I'm also very excited that they are doing a new Ghostbusters film. Of course, this is kind of a reboot. It's not going to be fitting into this universe. It's going to be an all-woman Ghostbusters team, which I think is exciting. It's not copying in terms of having another character named Venkman, another character named Winston. I love the fact that they're going to be brand new characters and brand new Ghostbusters and just contain elements that made these films so if everyone looks forward to this, speaking on the Ghostbusters films, please stay tuned. After being kicked out of their cushy jobs at the university, Spangler, Stantz, and Venkman decide to go into business for themselves by trapping and removing ghosts. After some initial skepticism, business is soon booming as the Ghostbusters rid New York of its undead. When a downtown skyscraper becomes the focal point of spirit activity linked to the ancient god Gozer, the Ghostbusters are called on to save the Big Apple. For cast, you have Bill Murray as Dr. Peter Venkman, Dan Aykroyd as Dr. Raymond Stantz, Sigourney Weaver as Dana Barrett, Harold Ramis as Dr. Egon Spangler, Rick Moranis as Louis Tully, Annie Potts as Janie Milnitz, William Atherton as Walter Peck, Ernie Hudson as Winston Zedmore, and David Margulies as Mayor. The movie was written by Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis, and it was directed by Ivan Reitman. Now, Ghostbusters has always been one of my favorite movies ever. Growing up, you know, there was certain films that just were films that I would watch over and over again. Ghostbusters was one of the main ones, alongside like Beverly Hills Cop. The Ghostbusters films were just they were just my favorites, and I loved the entire cast. I wasn't, I was pretty young when Ghostbusters came out. I was about 10, and I remember I did see it in the theater. My dad took me to see it. And he was a big fan of Bill Murray from movies like Caddyshack and things like that. And I had known Dan Aykroyd from Trading Places, which I had seen, I think, maybe the same year. So I knew who he was just from that film. But yeah, again, I was a kid that loved Halloween. I loved ghosts. I loved like Scooby-Doo and those kinds of things. And that's kind of what I looked at this as. You know, it was kind of like an adult version of a Scooby-Doo, where instead of them being, people that were in costumes and things like that, they were actually real ghosts, though. But yeah, I was just a huge fan of this film, and this film is just still a timeless classic for me. So it's just watching it now, it's just like it still holds up. I love the cast. Bill Murray is my favorite, always has been. I love him as Peter Venkman. Peter Venkman's always been my favorite character in the Ghostbusters films. But I also love Raymond Stantz, Dan Aykroyd, and Egon Spangler. Sadly, Ernie Hudson passing away last year was a really tough pill to swallow. But also it was my introduction to Sigourney Weaver. I hadn't seen the Alien film. Well, I hadn't seen Alien yet. Aliens was a couple years off after this film. But also Rick Moranis is fantastic in this. Ernie Hudson, I've always been a fan of him. I love him as Winston. I don't think he gets enough credit for the work he's done in the films. But yeah, the special effects are great. I love Slimer. I love the whole I've been slimed. And, just the special effects in this were just, ahead of their time. The Stay Puft Marshmallow Man scene. I mean, there's just so much great stuff in this film. You cannot say enough great things about it. And, it's one of those films that, I loved the Real Ghostbusters cartoon series, was really into that. I had most of the toys from that. Even though I was a little older when that show came out, I'm still a toy collector now, so it shouldn't be too much of a shock that I was collecting them at 11 and 12. But yeah, this was just a
Fantastic
fantastic
film.
Just loved all the cast members. It was really more adult, and I think that when I talk about Ghostbusters 2, that's something there is a big difference between this film and the second film. This one was made for adults. And there's a lot of adult humor in this film. So when the Ghostbusters cartoon came out, I think it changed things up a little bit in terms of the context and some of the humor in the future installment of the series. But yeah, I absolutely love this film. I think Ghostbusters is one of my favorite horror comedies of all time. It's just a film that never gets old. I love watching it. Really nostalgic now. The fact that we lost Harold Ramis last year was just shocking because he wasn't that old. I know he was in his early 70s, but still, the fact that Egon is gone is pretty sad. But yeah, Ghostbusters is easily 5 skulls.
Set 5 years after the events of the first film, the Ghostbusters have been plagued by lawsuits and court orders, and their once lucrative business is now bankrupt. However, when Dana begins to have ghost problems again, the boys come out of retirement. The Ghostbusters soon discover that the New York is once again headed for supernatural doom, with a river of ectoplasmic slime bubbling beneath the city, and an ancient sorcerer attempting to possess Dana's baby and be born anew. Cast, you have Bill Murray as Dr. Peter Venkman, Dan Aykroyd as Dr. Raymond Stantz, Sigourney Weaver as Dana Barrett, Harold Ramis as Dr. Egon Spengler, Rick Moranis as Louis Tully, Ernie Hudson as Winston Zedmore, Annie Potts as Janie Melnitz, Peter McNichol as Dr. Janusz Pohan, Harris Yulin as the judge, and David Margulis as the mayor of New York. Story was written by Harold Ramis and Dan Aykroyd, and the movie again was directed by Ivan Reitman.
And in 1989, we would get Ghostbusters 2. Now, this is after the cartoon series had been established. The real Ghostbusters cartoon series would come out in 1986, and this film would come out 3 years later. And as I was saying in my review of Ghostbusters, there is a tonal difference in this film as opposed to the first Ghostbusters. First Ghostbusters had a lot of, and it's noticeable, there's a lot of differences in the subject matter. There was a lot of risque subject matter. There was the fact that the guys were smoking all the time, smoking cigarettes. It was just different. And this film is a lot more kids. I mean, there are still swearing and things like that in it, but this film feels more like a kids film than the first one did, and I think that's why Bill Murray had a problem with this film. I know Bill Murray is not a fan of Ghostbusters 2. He didn't feel like it had the edge, and in fact, really going back, I remember when the entire cast was on Oprah, and my mom told me about it because I was like 15 when this film came out, and I remember she taped it for me, and I watched it, and I remember even in that interview, somebody asked, do you think they'll do a Ghostbusters 3? And Bill Murray was the first one to say, I think people will probably have had enough after this one. And what's funny is that really rang true because they never made a Ghostbusters 3. But I actually really I know I was in the minority when it came out because this came out in the summer of Batman. That's what I always call summer of 1989 because that movie, Batman, pretty much toppled everything. But I really like Ghostbusters 2, and I think it gets unfairly criticized because it's a lot of fun. I think there's just I love the cast and seeing the cast come back together. There are some similarities between the first film and the second film. I mean, there's some things that they happen in the second film just like they happen in the first one. There might be a few differences, but for the most part, I just like the whole idea that the idea behind the story is that they were pretty much sued by the city for the destruction and everything, and now that their business is bankrupt. And I thought the idea of the bad vibes in New York building this ectoplasm slime underneath the city was really interesting, and the whole thing with Vigo and Peter McNichol is hilarious in this as Janusz Poha. I love him in this film. It was my first introduction to him because I didn't see Dragon Slayer, and I know he was in that before this, but he's hilarious in this film. But again, I think still Peter Venkman's my favorite character in this. But it was just great to have the entire cast back, and you know, it is the swan song for this cast because they did the Ghostbusters video game, which is probably the closest we would ever get to a third film in the series because they all came back to do the voices. But this is a really fun film, and I love the Scoleri brothers scene in the courtroom. I love the whole thing with the Statue of Liberty. But no, I love Ghostbusters too. Like I said, it's a little bit different in tone from the first film. I think the first film was more geared towards adults, and kids just, you know, just films back then were different. Not everything was geared towards kids as they are now. If it's a kids film, it's a kids film. Back then, like there was kids that were going to see very adult themed movies. And this one just feels a little more kid friendly than the original one did, but I still love it just as much as the first film, and so it does get 5 skulls. So I want to thank everyone for taking the time to watch my video about the horror comedies Ghostbusters and Ghostbusters 2. Absolutely fantastic films. Love them so much. If you guys haven't seen them, please go out and check them out. They're a lot of fun. Don't wait until the reboot comes out. Check out these original films because they still hold up. They're a lot of fun. They're really nostalgic for me growing up in the time that these were popular and were coming out into theaters. And like I said, I really look forward to the reboot. I hope they do a good job. I have 100% faith in the cast and crew that they have. So yeah, we'll see what it looks like next summer when it comes out. So please share your thoughts in the comment section below about this video. I hope everyone has a great rest of their day. Take it easy.